This next video is running through showing all the different parts of the Battleship game, and there are quite a few different sections here. Obviously we've got our CSS style, which in this case once again is embedded right into the program. Obviously we could customize those, bring it out into something different if you wanted to in a separate file, and then there's also the JavaScript which actually does it. Obviously you should have already downloaded the different images that make up the background, the weapon, the enemy and the missile. How this game works is that it displays all the graphics and then you enter in X and Y coordinates to guess the position. The stage, like the container we used before, we're given its position on the page, 300 pixels by 300. We then add a background which fills up the entire stage with the 300 by 300 pixel in the top left 0 pixels, and then also we add the URL for the image. And then we also have the weapon, which we've got its sizes, and then we go into where it's going to be positioned on the screen in relation to the stage. So 270 pixels from the top, 140 left, so it's pretty much in the middle. We've got to remember these dimensions go from the top left of the picture. And then we have our background image, what picture we're going to use, weapon.png. We also have the enemy, its size, positions, its file name, and whereabouts it's going to start. With that you could always, randomly assign those at a later point, because there's nothing to stop anything in these scripts actually also being manipulated by JavaScript. The missile is basically like the bullet that's been fired, so it's once again layered in. We choose where we're going to have it start, and we have its height and width. It's the smallest object because it's just a little dot that basically appears. That concludes all the styles for the main sections. Now we've got the main divs of the areas. We've got our stage, which is our container where everything goes in, the background, which goes first, then the weapon, the missile, and the enemy that gets posted on. We also then, like before, have a paragraph tag with the output, and this is the information that's going to get displayed. It's a little message basically saying what you need to do, enter in your coordinates. This time we've got two input boxes, an X and a Y, so that we can get the X and Y coordinates that things need to go in. We also have a fire button, fairly self-explanatory that one. Click it, it shoots. And our variables, we've got our starting position of our enemy. We could randomly assign that, but we're not going to. We've got our guesses. Obviously we haven't made a guess at this point. Number of shots you've got remaining. And then the game one. So the states and the variables are very similar to before. We then have our setting up our variables and linking them to the objects we've created, the weapon, the enemy, the missile, the input, and the output. We set up the button. We then have our pointer, our cursor, and we add our event listener. Obviously we could also add in the event listener for the key to detect the enters, but this time we don't really want to do that because we want to make sure that both options have been entered before we actually do anything. So both X and Y have been entered. We've got our render function similar to what the last one had, except we've got a few more things we need to render this time. We've got the enemy, to render the enemy in the correct position, the weapon in the correct position, and the missile in the correct position. So all of those, we basically get it placed all in the exact right place. Our click handle, like before, all it does is just runs the play game. If you needed some validation, we could put that in, because you could go and add the validation to check to make sure that someone... what am I trying to say? I cannot remember. Yes, I can. The validation to make sure that a number has actually been entered and nothing else. yeah, so you can look at that. I think it was tutorial 3 for the simple maze game. Sorry, simple number game. We can also go to play game, which is where everything actually happens. We get to set our shots remaining. So each time we play the game, we take off one shot, and we add one onto the shots made. We display the stats. This time we've got to pass an integer for both options, the X and the Y. And then nice little comments in here, find out whether the enemy's inside the enemy's area, so if it actually is over top of where the enemy currently is. So this is like a bit of collision detection. So if the guess and the N is greater than or equal to the enemy position, and the other X guess is less than or equal to the enemy position, plus 20. So it's basically saying if it's within the left and right boundaries, then it's in the X range, and then we need to check the Y range as well. If it is, we say we've won the game, and we go to the end game outcome. Otherwise, you basically say it's a miss, and if there's not enough shots remaining, you go to the end game. So now we have our options. If it's not the end game, this is quite cool. What we actually end up doing is actually randomly moving the enemy around on the page. So we the X position is basically math random times 280, so between 0 and 280. Remember, the enemy is actually 20 pixels wide. That's why we do the 280, because we take the top left position of the enemy. So the 280 plus the width of 20 gives us the full size. And then we move the enemy down 30. So we go plus equal to 30. Then we re-render it, so we update the display, and we display on the log where the options are. We could obviously also add in X and Y scalars to basically show where they were, what values you put in, and the end game is just getting it to display our different messages. Well done.